Welcome to the Green Island podcast. I'm Bernard Sheehan, joined by James Sheehan. We are the authors of Hard Border, part of the Green Island novels series, set in Ireland around the time of Brexit, which is where the name comes from. Would really appreciate if folks, go out and get it. But as far as this podcast goes, we're going to continue to talk kind of all things Ireland, but also really more modern, what's going on right now as opposed to a couple of years ago, kind of look ahead a little bit, and also talk about current events as well. So, James, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is great. And yeah, Hard Border, this should be a good episode because a lot of the subject matter we're talking about, or at least half of it, is takes up a good portion of the book. So we're primed and ready to talk about it. But we might as well jump into current events first because that's always fun to talk about. We'll shoot ahead.
Yeah, definitely. I know we've had a lot of stuff that we talked about that's kind of pop culture-y, and this one's going to be the same. But, it's kind of like award season for these movies. And of course, we've been talking about Cillian Murphy being up for Oppenheimer and that whole Oppenheimer team being up for various awards. So you were talking about it a little bit, maybe last week or the week before, but I finally bit the bullet and found time, 3 hours, and rented it myself and watched it. So, want to come in and be able to speak about it a little bit more intelligently, even if it was running a little bit late for this. But I know that we definitely wanted to have that kind of under our belts and go into it. So I'm here and able to talk about it now, finally, after just seeing snippets on these various YouTubes and Rumble, etc.
Yeah, me too. Like I mean, I wasn't going to pay the full whack. I wasn't going to watch in the theaters because I didn't think it was worth the $30 or whatever after the time or maybe $60 by the time you bring your wife and get a babysitter or go for dinner. So I was like, I usually wait for these movies. I never go to the theater anymore. I almost wait for it just to come on Google Movies, where you can
Yep.
rent them, or Amazon Movies. And and I never pay the $25. I'm always waiting until it gets to $5.99 because I'm
Right.
not just I've just my appreciation of movies has gone down pretty significantly. I just think the last time I think I paid full whack for it was a Top Gun, which I was able to buy. Like you either rent or you buy it. I think it was an extra $1 to buy it. So,
Yeah.
and I watched it a few times, but Oppenheimer didn't really go into that category. I waited for it, and I'm kind of glad I did because there was a lot of hype around it, and I was almost pretty disappointed. I watched with my wife. We put it on kind of during the day on a Saturday, and we were just watching it, kind of just taking a breather. And it was I don't know if I like the format. I just, it was kind of I thought it was a little boring. It was kind of a cool kind of build up but to the bomb, but I thought it was kind of a little bit boring and kind of long and drawn out, where they
Long.
could have maybe almost made it 2 hours
Yeah.
instead of three and still got all the same content in there. And just the way I think and I don't know, are we doing spoilers for this? I think we probably should. And
Yeah.
just kind of, I thought Robert
Spoiler
Downey Jr.
alert.
was great.
Yeah. Spoiler
Yeah, I
alert.
think
The
spoiler
bomb does
alert.
go off. But
It
yeah.
does. It does.
But
And I'm giving
I
the movie
agree.
probably a B minus. I'm
Yeah.
giving the movie like a B minus. It was boring.
It was
Really, it was boring.
boring.
It was kind of cool up to the point where they set up the bomb, but it was all about him being a communist and then like him ruining his career. After, because he kind of, like I would say most people do, after you kind of create a bomb that kills a couple 100,000 people, you do have blood on your hands, and he had a lot of guilt, and he kind of should have. To be honest with you, I mean, you did participate in that, and he kind of wanted to make sure it was governed properly and regulated properly, and it just and they kind of point him as a communist, and the Truman, I think, was the president at the time, wanted to ramp it up, and it really was it just got boring after the bomb went off. The last hour was like, oh my gosh, the bomb was made, it was success. They should have just cut it then, but it was a whole kind of thing about going into the arc of more almost not even Oppenheimer, but more like the Robert Downey Jr. character was pretty
Mhm.
much almost the last hour of it. which was kind of interesting. So it'll be good to see your take on that.
So I was the same way. I thought it was boring too. And it didn't even really start getting into the bomb stuff until 45 minutes in. And I was watching because just like you, I was watching with my wife. We had a situation where I was like, okay, our TV broke over the weekend. So it was like, okay, I'm going to go out, get a new TV. It's kind of a good time here in the States to buy with the Super Bowl around the corner. They're all on sale. So I was like, okay, this works out. And you know what? Why don't we put on Oppenheimer after? And then I can finally talk with you about it. And man, she got up and left after half an hour. I mean, she was just like, it's not grabbing me. I'm out. And I was sitting there with I had made the popcorn, the whole deal. And I get it. It was boring. And I'm sorry. It may win Best Picture, but I feel like, I don't know. I mean, Christopher Nolan, I think I'm coming to the realization I don't like his movies, that much, to be honest with you. I don't know if it's like the sound quality or what. You can't really hear people speak, or I couldn't. And I know people are like, that's your sound system. But man, and it was just long and drawn out. And like you said, the whole communist stuff really got tedious after a while. And I think they were apologizing for a little bit of it too. Do you know what I mean? Where it's just like, oh, these communists lost their jobs and stuff. But this was war, and it was really, I disagreed with the premise of it, where they're like, oh yeah, they killed 100,000 people. They saved millions of lives by doing that, in my opinion, because they've done studies, and they did studies back then that Japan was going to fight to the last man if you tried to invade mainland Japan. And they were doing it. They were already fighting to the last man over, various little islands out there. So the Japanese, or the Pacific theater, was a bloodbath. And I'm going to make a recommendation. I don't know if anybody's seen like Band of Brothers. I don't know if you've seen Band of Brothers, but there's like a one called The Pacific that's also done by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg. And you really get a good feel for how bad the Pacific theater was. I mean, every battle was like you're basically in hell on some rock out in the Pacific fighting for your life. So it's I don't know. I just felt like all these people who are protesting stuff even before the bomb was made, I know that was probably historically accurate. So even beyond the movie, it also just bugged me. Do you know what I mean? Like these people who are just like, are you in or are you out? Are you going to help win the war or not? And it just seemed like they were all conflicted about that constantly. And I just didn't get it. I was like, what's wrong with you people? I mean, that people are dying all over the world. It seemed like they wanted to, and again, it's probably historically accurate, so it might just be some of those parts that were driving me crazy. More than more than like maybe the subject matter. It was that these people had issues, and had issues with dropping the bomb, and they were already protesting before they'd even had it created. And it's like, what's wrong with you? I just didn't get it. I thought one of the cool things was, again, spoiler alert, that they were worried that they were going to ignite the atmosphere and potentially kill everybody. So I was just like, that was kind of cool to at least have them thinking along those lines, because that was really pretty scary from that standpoint. Like, hey, nothing like this has ever been done before. We don't know what the chain reaction is going to be and how bad that's going to be. Obviously, now we live in a nuclear world, and we know that you can drop multi megaton bombs all over the place. And yes, it's bad, but we're still here. From like testing out in the Pacific, et cetera, what they were doing back in the day. But I thought that was really pretty cool, kind of this unknown science.
The tension leading up to the Trinity test affected everyone present, as historian James Hirschberg describes.
There was a lot of nervous walking around, and there was a lot of dark humor going around. And supposedly Enrico Fermi had been taking bets as to whether the first explosion would destroy the world or just the state of New Mexico or things like that. And this sort of alluded back to the fact that in 1942, there had been a fear raised that what if the first atomic bomb explosion ignites a chain reaction in the atmosphere that destroys all life on Earth. The chances they came up with was that the odds were just 3 in 10 million. And they decided those were acceptable odds. We could take that risk.
Manhattan Project physicist and future Nobel Prize winner Emilio Segre recalls how anxious he became before the Trinity test, for good reason.
I had informed myself whether they were absolutely sure that the atmosphere wouldn't catch fire. And they said yes, they showed me what they had done. So, but you know, I mean, you can always make a slip. And that thing was pretty fearful. So, I mean, I can't see that when it started to calm down, the question of igniting the atmosphere had been taken quite seriously. People had calculated all the mass effects, all the packing fractions, and everything that one knew, and making all the possible hypotheses. Came out that there was no chance of igniting the atmosphere. But I'm enough of a physicist to know that you calculate everything and then something happens you never dreamt of.
But like you said, once they built it, they were all just kind of like, oh, great, now we've killed people. It's just like, no, you've won the war. You potentially have won the war. And they were complaining about, oh, Japan's about on their last legs and Hitler's dead, so this thing's over. It's like, it wasn't over. It wasn't over by a long shot. I mean, Japan was tough and they were going to fight to the end. So I mean, again, I know that's probably historically accurate. I don't know. It wasn't, I just didn't really enjoy it, to be honest with you. I guess that's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I believe you're absolutely right with the Japanese. Like, I mean, they were willing to sacrifice millions of people just to, save their skin or not lose the war. And I mean, I think they had it to the point where they had guns. They sent guys out into the battlefield to progress, and they weren't allowed to turn back. If they turned back, they were shot.
Yep.
It was kind of that mentality. So they were dead one way or another. And that's what I hate. That's what I hate about like the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, how they would just line up and move forward and start shooting, and people would be dropping like flies. There was no strategy really to it. It was just a numbers game. And I would believe you're correct that they did save millions of lives or hundreds of thousands of American lives, but it's the whole bomb thing. But it was kind of up to that point. I think just doing the bomb was kind of, I was satisfied, but the aftermath of the whole communist thing was just annoying, because I think when it comes to this, they don't know. Communists cost more lives than everything combined, almost,
right.
The communism of people killing their own people, like Stalin and Mao. And they killed, hundreds for the 100 years of communism. It's lost about 1 million a year by own people killing their own people. Like, it's like Joe Biden going after Americans now, like to get them to submit to a new way, they have to kill them all, or like, and so hey, at least you're killing other people rather than your own people. And it's I was just so bored. I didn't think it really reflected an Oscar nominated kind of to just clean up. It was no Saving Private Ryan. It was no, Gladiator or these sort of movies that kind of like, wow, that deserves to win. It was a slam dunk. This was kind of like, it's a nice documentary. It's a fun movie. It just shows how little good movies are out there now, that this one's kind of cleaning up. And Christopher Nolan may have got it this time, but he probably deserved it on other ones that were better. Like Inception, I thought was very good. Even Batman's were much better, at least from an entertainment standpoint. And would Cillian Murphy deserve the Emmy or the Academy Award? I don't know, because just because you lose a little weight, you're still the same guy. I mean, I think Robert Downey Jr. deserves it. I thought he kind of was, you look at him and you don't think of Robert Downey Jr., even though you've seen him on 10 or 20 films in the last couple of years as Iron Man, you kind of know that face. It's like a Tom Cruise. I think that's the benefit of Tom Cruise is when you watch a Tom Cruise movie, you don't think of him as Tom Cruise. He does have that character where if you have some other movies like, Brad Pitt, you're like, there's Brad Pitt acting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's these type of guys where like Tom Cruise, it's more about the movie and the action. And it's like, oh, well, he's playing a character and he's like, you look at him as the character. But Cillian Murphy, I just don't believe, I just don't think the whole thing deserved it. It was just boring at the end, and the whole communist thing just kind of was just tedious. Like the whole,
Yeah.
it was like almost a trial at the end. And of course, should we say the bad guy? Like I think the arc, and spoiler alert, the arc of Robert Downey Jr. came off as a good guy at the beginning
Hmm.
and a bad guy at the end. And I think that's almost the whole arc of the whole movie.
Right.
And because it's like, well, we knew the bomb was going to go off and stuff like that. But to save your point, with regards to igniting the atmosphere, I thought that was very good to put in there because I kind of liked that.
Yeah, me
Like
too.
there's something unknown. It was kind of like, are they going to do it? They're scrambling for the math. And, but I just thought it was kind of the whole thing about, I wouldn't want to be a physicist after that movie. I thought they were all a bunch of dorks and like, just living off a theory and watching, in universities and, or in Los Alamos and stuff like that. And, it didn't really seem like they were doing much. And, but it was kind of fun to see. It was fun to see up until the point that they made the bomb and it went off and it didn't blow up the atmosphere. But after that, they could have cut it.
Yeah.
I honestly believe. And I was a little disappointed that it was so boring because Christopher Nolan doesn't make boring movies, in my opinion. And now he has.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I don't know. Like you say, a lot of his stuff too, like whether it's Interstellar or something, some of his other movies. I know there's a lot of like sci-fi elements to them that catch people don't necessarily like. Or there was that one with time travel that people don't really like all that much. I know that again, I kind of look at my wife as Joe America sort of thing, and as soon as there's time travel involved, she's out. She's like, I don't care, I don't want to know.
Which one's the time travel one? I know Inception was like the one where they go into the dreams and it's like then it's much slower and stuff like that.
There was
time travel.
There was another one with what do you call it? Denzel Washington's son. He's like an action guy now, and they were going backwards in time. Tenet. Thank you. That's the one.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, and even that, there was I'm sorry, I know people are, or whoever's listening is kind of screaming, but there was that one too, like really early in his career where the guy couldn't remember anything past a certain point. He had tattoos all over his body as he's trying to find the killer. So that had kind of like a lot of time.
With Guy Pearce.
Yeah, with Guy Pearce. Yeah, that's the one.
That's a great one.
That's a great movie. Yeah, but it had like, it was kind of messing with time is my point.
Yes.
So that, right. Because we found out stuff at the end, etc. And that's a really good movie. But I don't know. Again, like I said, this one was just long. Man, Cillian Murphy, quite honestly, I thought he did good, but I don't really have anything to compare it to. I don't know what Oppenheimer's like. I mean, his American accent was fine, but he was definitely Cillian Murphy. Like you said, I actually thought Matt Damon was pretty good in it too, and he can rub people the wrong way. And I was really happy with
Robert
Downey Jr. Thank you. Yeah. Because you had mentioned it last time when he was in Chaplin. He was great in that. And it's funny because the character, like the old man character that he played now, is kind of like almost the age of what Chaplin was at the end. Remember when he was kind of in Switzerland near the end of his career, and he had like all the makeup on because he was in his 20s, so they had to do that. So but he still did.
Still married to a 17-year-old though, or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's that's a whole other thing too. That's those things are kind of woven in there. You're like, oh no, that's not good. That's bad. I mean, that's I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that, especially in the history of rock and roll, when you're just kind of like, oh no, that's not good. And a lot of that stuff was kind of normal back then, but again, off on a tangent there. Like I said, it was what it was, but I didn't see it in the theater either. And man, am I glad, because most of the time I walk out of the theater just disappointed, and I know I would have been with this too.
100%, especially after spending that money. And I thought Matt Damon did a good job. I'm not a particular fan of Matt Damon anymore. Like I loved him in Rounders and those type of early movies, but now he just like after where he shrunk down the size and all, like a lot of his stuff is just garbage.
Right.
Now it's kind of like, and I don't know, I'm not a big fan, but I thought he did a good job. I particularly liked the scene when he walked into Oppenheimer to kind of recruit him. That was a good scene.
Yeah.
And, but I'm just not a fan of his anymore. I'm a Ben Affleck fan, which is odd because I think he still pumps out some good stuff, or at least is trying to do some. But Matt Damon just isn't my kind of guy. He did Air recently with on like getting Michael Jordan to sign this shoe. He wasn't
was
that
good.
bad, but it was kind of a good movie and stuff like that. But overall, I'm not really a Matt Damon fan anymore. I think it's just, I think Ocean's 11 may have killed me on him. He's
Yeah.
just a little silly.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was good, and even like the little details, like every time it seemed like every time he was walking into a scene, he had a new star on his shoulders. He was kept on getting promoted from colonel to general, and then 2-star general. So it was just little details like that I really did like, but some of the
And I
stuff
like the
too.
detail when Oppenheimer's like they're sending the bomb out of Los Alamos when it's ready, and he's just like, "No, you'll keep me updated." And Matt Damon's like, "Why?" You're kind of done. Like
Right.
you don't get to know any of this now. Like, and
Right.
that's the whole thing about really project management and kind of building something. It's very hard to let go when you built your baby and you don't own it. Because Oppenheimer didn't have the $2 billion back then to build it. And it's kind of, I think that's really tough. I mean, that really showed a good kind of understanding of people that own, like, build stuff, but then they don't own it. And then the guys come and take it, and you don't know what's going to happen to what your invention is. So
Right.
there's a real kudos out there for people do invent stuff with their own money and hold on to it and kind of progress it forward, because like that's the last invention you want to kind of leave to the powers that be. But anyways, I mean, you can kind of contribute that maybe it kind of stopped the war for the last 50 or 100 years because of the deterrent side of things. But
Yeah.
just getting back to the movie, though, I thought Christopher Nolan, I will never watch it again. I'll watch him, of course, and I'll wait for the next movie. But I think Tenet was also a kind of a boring one, and the whole, I mean, I was analyzing it back and forth, and I still have problems with it because some of the stuff is not fully correct if you would kind of take it as the exact mirror image of the guy at the end and stuff like that. But anyways, we won't get into it. But yeah, that's my review of Oppenheimer. So I don't, they'll probably clean up at the Academy Awards because there's nothing else except for that Paul Giamatti movies, which is equivalent to the same of like Dead Poet Society, which is Dead Poet Society. It's very hard to beat. Like that dorm room kind of lonely kid atmosphere, teaming up with the teacher and stuff like that. But I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on it. But I mean, I would say the budgets of probably that movie was probably $10 million compared to Oppenheimer. That was probably 400 million. Do you know what I mean?
I do,
And they're
yeah.
probably going to get the same. So
Yeah.
hopefully Christopher Nolan's next one is, I mean, they're probably searching for topics, but I wasn't too impressed. I didn't see anything new, and I wasn't, I won't watch it again. Not like Top Gun, which is always a crowd pleaser, and I'll pop it on any time of the day or night.
Right. Yep. So yeah, I mean, we'll still watch and see how these guys do at the Academy Awards. Like you said, there's not that much out there, so they'll probably sweep, and obviously that's good on them. And we'll watch it and come back and talk about it a little bit more. But oh man, I was disappointed. Anyway, I know we wanted to talk a little bit too about some of the things that are going on in Ireland. Just briefly before we call it. I think we had talked about, some of the protests and things like that. And there had been protests over in France as well, being led by the farmers. And that seems to be catching on in Ireland too, where they're in solidarity with them, with some of their regulations around how they do their business. And the Irish farmers have been rising up as well.
Well, I mean, that's very adamant for this book, a very kind of, it's very timely because this hard border, I mean, there's 5 chapters dedicated to that. I mean, that's how they do it. Ireland is virtually an agricultural country. It was up to the tech boom of the Celtic Tiger when they lowered the taxes and all the, multinational tech companies and banks moved in. But before it's just agriculture, and their main product was beef. And but now they're it's all based on inputs from my limited kind of research of what's going on with the EU right now. But it's all inputs, and it really is about just cleaning out the farmers. They don't want the farmers anymore. They think they can get robots to do it. They don't want the farmers to own the land. So how did they get the farmers out? they increase the value of the inputs that they have control over.
Yeah.
And that's how they did it to Ireland, where Ireland literally in the book, but right before 2000 COVID, they were cleaning out the farmers by increasing the value of, the input on seeds, fertilizer, every input, where people actually who had no mortgages on their land, had a farm, had to borrow against their land to cover the inputs, thinking they would cover it. And it's all manipulated, because we found out later behind the scenes, and it's really covered in the book, that there's only one or two beef producers, and they're virtually a cartel that, Ireland, of course, won't investigate. The EU won't investigate. So they're price fixing. And so every year, kind of your cattle grows and you sell them in, say, January, February, right? After the grass is kind of gone. And so they have feedlots, and feedlots are kind of like illegal farms hidden around the country that, like, you think you have maybe 2 million cows, hypothetically, or 500,000 cows. And that's like you have 100 of them, and the price, because, price versus is dictated by the quantity in the market versus supply and demand. But you don't know that there's another 200,000 down the street that no one knows about, that's not in the public register, these cows, because I think you got to register them all. And as soon as selling time comes in, these 200 cows are thrown into the quantities, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
And then they lower the price of everybody because there's too much stock in the market. And as soon as then they're done, but who's doing the feedlots? Who's doing them? The beef processors are owning them outside their normal business. So it's all artificial. They're screwing them on the inputs by increasing the inputs, and then they're reducing on the price by throwing in a bunch of stock no one knows is supposed to be there. Or they're bringing them in from Brazil, again, up from carry that no one watches. And it's kind of just a joke. And it really, who's the end? It's owners that no one knows about, and offshore entities, and who's getting killed but the local citizens and farmers. And it's the same old story,
And when they bring in foreign beef like that, or cattle, they're then able to say, now this is a product of Ireland, right? Because it's been on Irish soil, and they probably had like a couple mouthfuls of grass out of Ireland. Now they're like, oh,
100%.
Yeah.
100%. It's kind of like they'll bring them in when they're almost fully grown, give them a few, leaves to eat, and boom, Irish fed. I don't think it's Irish grown, but it's Irish fed. Or there's a kind of, they'll get around but everybody who looks at it knows it's kind of thinks it's from Ireland, born and bred, and it's not. It's not. And Ireland's beef does have a unique taste, and a lot of people like the Irish butter, and they do the same thing with the butter too, where they say it's actually like grass fed. Mm-hmm. It's not grass fed. It's like they might have it on the grass for kind of 1 week out of the year. Because I had these guys, friends of mine, they created a product, they're all farmers, of like measuring grass, how much grass grows, how much do the cows eat, to kind of, understand how much they're eating. And of course, they got some subsidies from the government. And as soon as they're ready to go, not subsidies, really, like the government came in as shareholders. As soon as they're ready to go, the government shut them down, took their product, called in their loans, and and this was no big deal. Like there was a few Americans in there, and and it was all kind of the cover up stuff. Like one of the American investors was like one of the top first guys with Apple. And when it was called the Grassometer, and I think I'm free to talk about this because there's lawsuits and maybe a documentary, they're looking at it, but. So how did they stop him from bringing a lawsuit in the States? Well, of course, as soon as he started talking, and this was this wasn't a Republican, this was a liberal guy. He's worked with Apple.
Sure.
And as soon as he started, and he's like 70. So he didn't really want to fight, but he put maybe $1 million into this. He was kind of the tech guy, and a few farmers, and it was all supposed to be good and like best for the cattle. As soon as he brought, thinking of bringing a lawsuit, and like telling the Irish, like, we're going to sue you in the States because there's connections there. His local government increased his tax on his house by 50%. They went after a whole bunch of stuff in his business. This is in America.
So this is California, presumably?
I think he was actually in Maryland.
Okay.
Or so, like he was in a blue state with a blue local government. And so it just shows how Ireland and the blue Democrats in Ireland are literally a single party.
Yeah.
And it happened to us. And I won't get into what happened to us when we tried to do stuff in the States, but they're all the same. And that's why Hillary Clinton's always in Ireland, and Bill loves to come here twice a week. Or it's just they're all interconnected. And so he almost had a nervous breakdown. I think he stopped because he just didn't understand what was going on. He didn't understand that actually the people that he supported for his entire political life were actually probably donated to were now targeting him because he was going to bring a suit. And the whole thing was really, we can't let you measure the grass because we can't tell you how, we can't let you under the world know that we're actually not feeding our butter cows or the cows that are create grass. We're actually feeding them something else. But if you look in Jewel or Target,
Costco.
the Irish butter, Costco, it says grass fed right on there.
Sure
and it could be
does.
grass fed for maybe 5 minutes, and that's about it. And that's the whole thing with like these feedlots. There's 100 cows. There's supposed to be like 1 cow per acre, for the runoff into the local rivers and stuff. Hundreds, possibly hundreds of cows per acre. That's why the rivers are supposed to be all polluted. And there's guys like I know that kind of did samples on the rivers, and it all came up that there was steroids in the rivers for chickens and all types of stuff. And the chicken guys all got cleaned out as well. So it went from in Ireland over the last 5-10 years, it went from let's just say poultry, there was 30 manufacturers down to 5.
Yep.
Beef, there was 5, and now it's down to 2. Milk, so everybody, and then they don't really care about the farmers because they all want to be vertically integrated now.
That's right.
And they go code. So it's really just a cleanup process. And I would say it's happening now EU-wide because Ireland, again, being the petri dish, it worked well. The farmers all rioted and protested because the beef guys, the processors who are supposed to be like a marginal business of 1%, are turning out to be the richest guys in Ireland on the books, and hiding it offshore of where all their money's coming from and saying, oh, well, we just don't have enough money to pay you for your cattle, where it's just and you can't see their books because they're not public. Right. And it's the fact that they're actually just ripping them off, making a ton of money for people that are virtually just butchers compared to the guys that spent a year growing the cattle, or hundreds of years to actually, if you saw Yellowstone, where it's not only just about the cattle, but it's about the lineage of the cattle, and how if there's anything happens, these are, they're using their same cattle over and over the next generation. So it's kind of, building up that quality, and they're just decimating everybody. And so I would say they're just rolling it out across the EU with the inputs, with the environmental taxes, and enough is enough. And when they did it and they pulled up their tractors to the gates of Dublin and had Dublin surrounded, the Minister of Agriculture wouldn't even come out and talk to them.
Right.
No one would come out and talk to them. So I don't think they're going to get anywhere. So burning it is the next thing, because the officials aren't going to, they've been given orders and they're not going to participate. And of course you have all these associations, the Beef Farmers Association, the Cattle Farmers Association, the Farmers Association, but you'll find out every single president is an inside man to the cartels. We've done all the research on the same thing. It's all the boys club. I don't know how they get into power. So they're saying, we'll help you out, but they never actually help you out. Do you know what I mean? And they might kick it down the road where we'll give you some subsidy tomorrow or today, but you're dead tomorrow. I mean, it's just incrementalism. And they're as good as dead unless they start burning it down. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cause violence and stuff, but the reality is, having seen the Irish protests of 2018, it went absolutely nowhere. They got a minimal concession just to kind of stop it and get the international press off their back and kind of hide all the fraud that was really going on. But I don't think they're any better off. If not, they're probably much worse off,
Well, the thing is now, if this is coming to France and they feel like they've been successful in Ireland, again, that's the laboratory, and the timing of what you're talking about does coincide with hard border, and we discuss it and allude to similar things in the novel. But if it's coming to France, they have a little bit of a different history of protesting, so we'll see how that goes. And obviously France is a big player in the EU, so it's them and Germany, and then everybody else is kind of like the other folks. So
well actually Netherlands is actually the biggest farmers, I think almost second biggest in the world. I mean, they're all agriculture, and what's in Netherlands. So they kind of took the proactive approach of just starting electing farmer pro politicians. that are trying to stop it. And I think they were actually going to have a new guy to be PM. And of course, they manipulated his PM from being a PM guy who's like the Donald Trump of Netherlands. But it's only the start. And I think they're not going to get any concession that means that their farms are going to be taken off of them. I mean, their farms are going to be taken off them because they're just going to bankrupt them out of business. Effectively, that's what they do. And I heard that's kind of how it is in the farming industry, because I know a few guys that work for Rabobank, which is like the farmers bank in Netherlands. And it's either farming, it's interesting because one year you have a great stock, next year you have no, the weather's horrible. So it's like, it's a feast or famine mentality. It's like either they make money and they go to the farm to borrow to buy new equipment, or they don't make money and they go to the bank to borrow until the next harvest.
Right.
So the banks are always doing well off the farmers, but I would say they're at the point where, Bill Gates probably has some tech or something that's going to eliminate them. But, there we are.
Yep. Yep. We'll keep watching that and we'll see what develops from there, because that's another stressor on the system. I know we ran long today, but I thought that was a good discussion. Thanks, James. Really appreciate you taking the time here tonight. And we'll be back soon with, kind of what else is going on out there and maybe some of these bigger issues as well.
Excellent. Thanks
again.
very much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.